I'll be taking you on the subject, which is the physical and health education. But on this subject today, the topic we'll be talking about is on contact and non-contact sports. Again, the topic is contact and non-contact sports. There are some of the major points that I would like to explain very well, or I would like to dwell in very well on the topic, which are the definition. We are going to learn the definition of the topic, which is we are going to define the contact and non-contact sport. And also, we are going to learn the different types of contact sport. As well, we are going to learn about the different examples of both contact and non-contact sport. We are going to learn all this. Now, let me take my bearing from that of contact sport. First of all, we are going to learn what contact sport is all about. What do we mean by contact sport? What can you say about contact sport? Have you ever heard the word contact sport before? Now, there are some sporting activities that we group to be contact sport. There are some of them that we group to be non-contact sport, of which these sporting activities are the ones you know. There are the different kind of sporting activities that you are conversant with, but the thing is, you don't actually know that they are being grouped into all those groups, which are the contact and non-contact sport. Now, let me start from defining or explaining what contact sport is all about. Contact sports are the series of sporting activities that involve two players having bodily contact with one another as a normal play. Let me come again. I said that contact sports are the series, that is, it is not one, it is not two. There are some sporting activities that you have to involve yourself, you as an athlete or a player or a performer of that activity. You have to make sure that it is, as a normal play, there is going to be what we call bodily contact. You must have bodily contact with one another as a normal, because it's part of the style of that particular game. Now, for example, let me cite wrestling as a very good example of contact sport. There is no how you're going to perform wrestling as a sport and you are not going to have bodily contact with one another. It's impossible. You must eat one another. You must touch one another. Your opponent must eat you. You yourself must eat your opponent. It's the style of the game, which is very, very important. That touching, that hitting, that bodily contact you are having with one another is what we refer to as contact. Am I communicating? That is what we refer to as contact. Like I said earlier, I said contact sports are series of sporting activities in which players come into bodily contact with one another as part of normal play. That is, during the course of this sporting activity, it is compulsory. Those are the things that you are expected to do as a performer of this activity. You are expected to hit one another. You are expected to have in touch with one another. You are expected, you hit me, I hit you. You punch me, I punch you. That's what we actually being referred to as contact sport. I can as well say that in this game, athletes or performer must touch, it's a must touch each other during performance. What are the examples of this that we are actually talking about? A very good example, we have judo. Judo is a very good example of contact sport. What about karate? Wow, is another example. We have wrestling and we have boxing. Because of our time, let me stop there and let me explain further on it. Like I said earlier, look at when you take a look at these examples very well. In judo, there is no how that a performer will perform judo as a sporting activity without the two performers involved, without the two of them touching one another. It's a must for them to touch one another. In karate, the same thing applies to karate, the same thing applies to wrestling, and as well boxing. These activities are the one we refer to as contact sports. Now, let me move on. This contact sport, in this contact sport, we have two major types of sporting activity that can be grouped under contact sports. We have two major types of, we grouped, all the sporting activity under contact sport to be two. One, we have partial I am talking about types of contact sports. The first type is partial contact. The second one is full contact. Those are the two major types. Those are the two major types of contact sports. The partial contact and full contact. They are the two major types of contact sport. I'm not started talking about non-contact sport. I am still on contact sport. Don't mix it. I'm still on contact sport, and I've explained what contact sport is all about and their examples. Now I am talking about the types of contact sport. Like I said, we have two major types of contact sports. We have partial contact and full contact. Let me explain. The first one is partial contact. When we are talking about partial contact, these are the series of sporting activity in which, when you have bodily contact with one another as a player, is illegal. If you have any bodily contact with your opponent, we count it under this as illegal. So it is not expected. According to the guideline of those games, according to the rules of the games, it is not expected. But, deliberately or accidentally, it could happen. But when it's happened like that, such bodily contact is illegal. But whether it's illegal or not, the fact still remains that you made bodily contact. That's why we call it partial contact. But the fact is, if you make bodily contact with your opponent during this kind of sporting activity we are talking about, your bodily contact basketball, handball. Let me stop there because of the time. I am going to explain it so you understand what I'm trying to say. In soccer or in football, during the course of the game, you are not expected to nod or to have what we call a collision with your opponent. You are not expected to kick your opponent for any reason. Though our players sometimes, deliberately or accidentally, they do it. Such bodily contact is illegal. Am I communicating? My viewers at home, I hope you can testify to what I'm saying. If your referee catch you while doing this, you know the penalty you are going to face as regards that. So in order to avoid all those punishments, it is not part of the game. It is not the style of the game at all to have the bodily contact with your opponent. If you do, it's illegal. But we refer to such contact as partial because sometimes it could happen, deliberately or not. Some players do it deliberately because maybe they don't want their opponent, to have loggerhead ahead of them, to have loggerhead ahead of them. They will do that thing in order to corner their opponent. That is the reason why some do it. Some players do it, accidentally because they don't actually want to do it. But sometimes it will happen. For example, maybe there is high ball. Now, the ball is going, there's an high ball coming towards the direction, and you are there to head the ball together with your opponent. You want to head the ball, your opponent will want to head the ball. Unfortunately for the two of you, you did not hit the ball, you hit each other. It's as a result, that bodily contact came as a result of accident. But whether it is accident, whether it is done accidentally, or it is being done deliberately, such bodily contact, it shouldn't be. It's not according to the line, or it's not according to the rule of the game. The same thing in basketball. In basketball, you are not allowed to have bodily contact with one another. In hockey too, in handball, you are not expected to have bodily contact with one another. That is one of the type of contact sports that we are talking about. The other one is full contact. Even from the word full, you can deduce what it means. Full contact, that is, in this kind of sporting activities, you are expected to involve the two performers or the two athletes involved in this game are expected to have full bodily contact with one another. For example, boxing. Boxing is one of the examples of full contact because in boxing you punch, your opponent to punch you. You do a particular thing to your opponent will reply. Another very good example of this is wrestling. Wrestling too is another example of full contact sports. Also, judo. We also have karate. What about taekwondo? Let me stop there. All these examples, all those sporting activities are the one we refer to as full contact sport. Because there is no how a performer would perform all those sporting activities without hitting one another. There's no how they would do the sporting activity without touching one another. It is according to the rule of the game. It's very, very easy. But in this one, if players have bodily contact with one another, it is expected. It is expected of him or her to have bodily contact with one another. Now, having talked about the types of contact sports, we've also learned about the meaning of contact sports. We've talked about the types. Now, let us quickly move to that of non-contact sports.
You are on.
And I was saying, I said we have, these are the types of contact sports. Now we are moving to non-contact sports. It's just like two different words entirely. In contact sports, the players, the athlete or the performer, they must have bodily contact with one another. Unlike that of non-contact sports, in non-contact sports, they have been separated physically. So there is no how they can have bodily contact with one another at all. That is why it's being called non-contact sport. The players, the athletes, or the performer are being physically separated in this kind of sporting activity. What am I trying to say? We said that in non-contact sports, these involve a series of sporting activities in which the players or athletes, they can be referred to as athletes as well, players, the athletes or players are being separated physically. They are being separated physically, or even according to the guidelines or the principle of the game. What am I talking about? Let me give you some examples to bring it down to your, understanding. We have table tennis. I hope you agree with me that table tennis is a very good example of non-contact sport. Because in table tennis, you and your opponent are being physically separated. There is no how you're going to have bodily contact with one another. Because there is going to be table at the middle. The table has been separated with the net already. You are going to mind your own side of the table. Your opponent is going to mind his own side of the table. By so doing, you have been separated physically. And so, there is no how you're going to have bodily contact with one another. And by so doing, such activity are being referred to as non-contact sport. Am I communicating? Now, let me give you another example of non-contact sport. I've mentioned table tennis. Now, another example is lawn tennis. In lawn tennis as well, the two players have been physically separated by the net. So there is no how you are going to have contact with one another. There's no how you are going to touch one another because you've been physically separated. Another example is, I've talked about table tennis as an example. I've talked about lawn tennis as an example. I think someone should be able to give me another example of non-contact sport. You want to tell me? Okay. Volleyball. Volleyball is another example of non-contact sport. Now, when you take a look at these examples very well, you can see the difference between the non-contact sport and contact sport. Whether it is partial contact or full contact, which are the examples or which are the types of contact sport, they are different entirely from non-contact sport. Because in non-contact sport, there is nothing that can bring you and your opponent together. You have been physically separated in non-contact sport. But in contact sport, you are together. In partial contact, you and your opponent are on the same field. In full contact, you and your opponent, you are in the same arena, fighting or competing to get or to know or to determine who is going to be the winner. But in non-contact sport, is another word entirely. Non-contact sport, in non-contact sport, the players or the athletes are being physically separated, and all those are examples of non-contact sport. Now, with all this now, we've been able to achieve our major objectives for today's lesson, which are, we are expected to learn or to be able to define the meaning of contact sports and non-contact sports. Also, we've learned about the types of contact sports and the different examples they have. Now, before I round up today's class, I have an assignment to give. But when I give the assignment now, when you want to submit the assignment, you can submit it to agsonline@gmail.com, or you can subscribe to Abergrams TV on YouTube. The example is that you are going to give me 3 major skills in contact sport. 3 major skills in contact sport. I will talk about the meaning of contact sports and non-contact sports. Right now, I want you to give me the 3 major skills or techniques in contact sports. I'm going to talk about the contact sports and various examples, that is different sporting activities that we can regard to as contact sport. Now you're going to give me 3 major skills or 3 major techniques that can be referred to as skills or techniques in contact sports. Like I said earlier, you're going to submit this assignment to the email agsonline@gmail.com, or you can as well subscribe to Abergrams TV on YouTube. Thank you. God bless you. Once again, I am Abiola Linka. Stay safe.